Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Midweek Live. I'll take a couple minutes here for you guys to jump in. I'm Sam, by the way, if you don't know me. Every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock we jump on here for 20 minutes-ish just to spend a little bit of time hanging out, talking about a couple of different things. We take a little bit of time just to review what the sermon was about very briefly, and then we dive into it even more. We expand on what was said. We take a little look more into it. And last weekend was awesome. Aaron did a fantastic job talking about a bunch of different stuff, specifically talking about doubt in regards to our faith and in regards to how God can be the one that redeems our past, our present, and our future. He told this really great story. He went into this really great story that's found in Luke, and it's about a woman who shows up in this party that's happening, basically, and what happens is this woman shows up at this party, and Jesus had been there, he'd been invited there, and she actually begins to cry tears over his feet, and then with her hair begins to wash his feet, and takes this really expensive bit of perfume and pours the perfume over his feet, and it makes it so that everybody in the whole room is really uncomfortable. But we're gonna go into that exact story even more tonight. I'm excited to bring even more light to that whole thing. We're gonna go verse by verse, but tonight I'm excited about talking about that through a very specific lens, and this is what it is. We're gonna talk about doubt and desperation. And I think it's a really interesting thing to look at. When you think about doubt and you think about desperation, there's just some really interesting things that you begin to look at and see. And this story, I think, does an outstanding job of really helping you understand what that looks like. And I think it really displays for us how our doubts can kind of work together in this particular way. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to jump into that story. It's actually found in Luke. It's found in two places, in a couple of different versions. It's found in John, but it's also found in Luke, and that's the one we're going to look at tonight. So it's Luke chapter 7. And one of the things I want to just look at for a little bit tonight is this idea that God can meet us within our doubts, and God can also meet us within our desperations. And there's this really interesting thing. When you doubt, it doesn't automatically mean that God is going to meet you there with excitement, and it isn't automatically going to mean that you're going to, when you engage those things, God's not automatically going to jump in and fix all your problems for you and make it all obvious. I think there's a little bit of work that has to be done sometimes, where we have to be willing to listen and hear what God has to say about our doubts. And I'm excited how this story kind of plays that out for us. So it's in Luke chapter 7, and in the very first verse says this. So it says, one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. All right, that's not very much information right there. Not very many verses, but I'm going to stop at that first verse and say that actually teaches us a couple of things. This Pharisee, he's obviously curious. Okay. Hey, there's this Jesus guy, and people are talking about him, and he seems to know a lot of different stuff, and I'm curious, what is he all about? People say he's a prophet. People say he's the Messiah, maybe. I should have him over for dinner. You know what? That sounds like a good idea. So this Pharisee is actually engaging his doubt. He's like, who is this Jesus? I want to know. And so he's engaging his doubt to the point of having Jesus over for dinner. Can you imagine having Jesus over for dinner? I mean, what would you serve him? If you guys want to jump in the comments, feel free to do so. You should say, hey, this is what I would serve Jesus for dinner. I think I would probably serve Jesus, I don't know. That's a great question. Maybe tacos. I don't know why, because I feel like you can put anything in tacos. And I feel like Jesus would be a good tacos guy. Maybe hummus. I don't know. He's from the Middle East. That'd probably be good. Probably would like that. I'd be curious what you'd feed him for dinner. Anyways, that's the first verse. He's obviously curious, and he's trying to engage his doubt. Good for the Pharisee, right? This is a good first step for him. Now, as things continue to go, the next step, the next one is this. Next verse, it says, when a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. Whew! John Spurger, you'd feed him ham. That is a great joke. I like that. Thanks for saying that. That makes me laugh. Anyways, to those verses. It'd be ham. I don't know if you know, but it's not kosher. So, like, if he's Jewish, he might not eat that. That'd be kind of fun. Anyways, back to the verses. This woman shows up and she begins to cry these tears and break open this alabaster jar, and she begins to like wipe his feet with her hair. Like, can you imagine that? Like, that would be, it'd be insane. It'd be so awkward. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I can sometimes have a really difficult time with awkward situations. Like, if you're watching a TV show and there's an awkward moment where, like, you don't know what to do, you don't know what to think, and people are, like, awkward around each other, I, like, avert my eyes. I don't think I can handle it. How many of you are like that? Do any of you avert your eyes during those situations, or, like, walk out of a room when a situation gets really awkward? That happens to me sometimes. I'm getting better. I'm working on, like, embracing the awkward. But this situation had to have been so incredibly awkward, uncomfortable. And that's made even more so when you realize who she probably is. Like, we get into this in just a little bit, but this woman is very obviously not your, she's not a Mother Teresa, as some people might say about her, right? She's not the type of person that is going to be doing this thing where she's the person everybody says, oh, that's a wonderful person. This woman most likely is a prostitute. And like Aaron said, one of the things that kind of stands out about her is she's got perfume, and that was maybe like a calling card of sorts. That was like, hey, you know you're a prostitute when you have perfume, because it's your way of showing people that that's what you do. And so this woman comes in, and she's got the perfume, she's wiping his feet, she's kissing his feet, really awkward. Everybody's probably gawking at it, not knowing what to do. And this is what the host of the party, the person who invites Jesus in, says. This is what happens next. This is what he says. It says this. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of a woman is touching him. She's a sinner. Now, think about this for a second. This guy is a Pharisee, so he knows the law really well. He knows the religious aspects of things really well. He feels like he's got a pretty good handle on who's from God, who's not. And so in his mind, he knows the customs of the day. He knows who's who, all that kind of stuff. This woman shows up. He knows who she is. But it seems like Jesus doesn't. And so if Jesus doesn't seem to know, the moment is a gotcha moment, right? Like, hey, gotcha, Jesus. You thought that, I don't know what you thought about this woman. You say that you're a prophet. You say that you're somebody big. Everybody's saying this about you, but you obviously don't know. You wouldn't allow this woman to touch you if you really knew. So you must not be a prophet. And that's kind of what he says and what he's thinking. What's awesome is that this is what he's thinking, and this is what happens next. It's verses 40 through 42. It says this. Then Jesus answered his thoughts. He answered his thoughts. Think about that. Jesus answered his thoughts. He didn't say this out loud. He thought it, and Jesus answered it. Said this. Simon, so the guy's name is Simon. He said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied in his like little school voice, right? Like, go ahead, teacher. Oops, I was thinking something, and maybe they really know what I'm thinking. Then Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other. But neither of them could repay him, so he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more than that, or more for that after that? I think this is a great little picture. Jesus tells this very quick, simple story. It's not an extensive thing, but it's a very quick story that he tells him. It's a quick parable. And in a very quick way, basically, Jesus puts Simon on his heels, and Simon has to answer like, oh, yeah, right? Like, I know some people who are forgiven a lot. They would be really grateful. They'd be really excited. They would love this man even more. On the other hand, those who are forgiven very little, it's not a big deal. It doesn't seem like a big deal to them. So, the person that is forgiven more loves more. And Jesus is beginning to teach this fact. I think that's a really cool thing. As we go even further, this is what it continues to say. It says, Simon answered, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt. So the larger debt was the thing. That's right, Jesus said. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, there's many sins there, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love, but a person who is forgiven little shows only little love. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. The man at the table said among themselves, who is this man that he goes around forgiving sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. So, a couple of things here. As we look at this, the last little bit there, it's really helpful for us to see something. I can't imagine being there in that circumstance where Jesus walks in and it's customary for there to be like oil put on his head and for you to wash the person's feet and to offer a kiss of greeting. It's kind of a normal thing for people in those days. For us, it's a little weird to kiss guests, but that wasn't the case in that day. So it was like a kiss of greeting. And none of those things were offered to him. And one of the things that I found over time, maybe you've seen this, maybe not, but God has this way of honoring people even when they don't get honored by the people that they should be honored by. When you're humble, when you stick things through, when you do things the right way, God has this way of honoring people. And I think that's neat, and I think it shows in Jesus here, and he even speaks about that. Like if you go in, you should sit at the lower place at the wedding table, and then the person that's taking care of the ceremony will move you up higher if you're supposed to, and that's a way of getting honored. Anyways, that's a little bit off topic, but I want to look at a couple of specific things tonight, and I want to ask you guys some questions, and you can think about this if you're watching later. Thanks for watching. I know a bunch of you watch after this is aired, and so I want you to wrestle with these questions. As we look at this story through the lens of doubt, and thinking about what doubt means and how it functions, Simon had his doubts, didn't he? Like he walked into this situation with his doubts. This Pharisee was quite ready to figure out what was going on. He felt like he was engaging his doubts. Here's this Jesus guy. Who is he? What's the deal? Why is everybody going crazy over him? I'm going to invite him over for dinner and I'm going to figure it out. Great, he's engaging his doubts. Sends an invitation. But what we see is, even though he was trying to engage his doubts, he wasn't really ready to hear from Jesus. What Jesus had to say, it was going to rub him the wrong way. And why, we don't know for sure, but we can see that he seemed to want to be right about something. Like he wanted to show just how smart he was, as opposed to maybe really receive and understand who Jesus was and what he had to teach. The woman, on the other hand, was different. The woman walks in, and whether she had her doubts or not, I mean, I would assume that she was maybe a little doubtful of whether Jesus would receive this gift that she was giving to him. I'm sure that she was maybe a bit doubtful of whether there would be forgiveness or not. And yet, there was a hope there. And even more than a hope, it seems like maybe there was this incredible desperation. This desperateness for what Jesus was offering. Like there's this thing that he's giving, and I've got all these issues in my life, all these things that are really being difficult in my life. And so because of that, I'm desperate for what Jesus has. And so I'm going to try and go after this thing. So she realizes her need. She realizes her desperation for what Jesus offered, this forgiveness, this freedom, and this path forward through her doubts was there. Like, because of her desperation, it offered this path forward through her doubts. Here's my question for you guys tonight. The one big question I have for you as it gets dark here. I think this might be my last one happening out on my deck. I've got a light on. Maybe I'll have to bring some more lights out and do that way, or we'll move it inside. But I have a couple quick questions for you. Are you more concerned with being right? Or are you more concerned with receiving what Jesus has to offer you? Is it more for you about figuring out what the right answer is and distilling your doubts because of figuring out that I'm right because of X, Y, and Z? Or are you going to Jesus out of desperation for the things that you know that you need from him? Sometimes the only way for us to really understand something and know how true or not something actually is to be willing to give ourselves over to experience it. It's to be willing to say, I'm going to allow myself to be enthralled with this thing. I'm going to allow myself to be given over to what's being offered here and be willing to try this out. I'm going to give myself up, hands open. Whatever you've got, God, I'm going to offer myself to you, whatever it is. That is sometimes the only way to know whether something is real and good and right or not. If we go in with this idea that, you know what, I'm going to test this thing out. I'm going to ask all the questions. I'm going to try and prove them wrong. There's this nature to us where we tend to be really good at finding little cracks in things, even things that might not be a real crack, but it sure seems like it's a real crack. And so because of that, these doubts that we have, they sometimes hinder our faith and hinder the way that we can grow or not. And sometimes what we really, really need is this desperation. This place where we can come to say, Jesus, I don't know. I have my doubts. They're there. I'm confused about lots of different things. But I'm desperate for what you offer. I need what you're giving out. I need this new life. I need this forgiveness. I need this new way of living. I need a purpose in my life. And so I'm going to come in hands wide open. You give what you want to give, and I'll take it. Sometimes desperation is what we need to break through these cold-hearted doubts that we have, these things that keep us from really experiencing God. Now, to finish up here, the last thing I'll say is this. It's that, one, these mosquitoes are still getting brutal, and I'm itching all over the place, so we're going inside next week. But the second thing is, and also it's nice and dark out, but the second thing is this. There are a million doubts. There are always going to be them. And I really do believe that they're one of the ways that we can grow our faith. You can use them as a roadmap for areas of your faith that you can learn more about God and have a bigger view of God with. But at the very same time, sometimes you have to realize that the only way that you're going to really know if this thing of having faith in Jesus and living for him is really worth it and is really something is if you're willing and able to walk in open-handed, knowing that you're never going to be enough on your own, knowing that it might be uncomfortable, knowing that it might be a difficult situation, knowing that you may not have all the answers or get all the answers, but you know there's something to this faith thing. You know there's something to believing in Jesus. You realize that he literally does change your life. He really, literally does transform you into a different person. And there's something there. And so you can either let your doubts build this wall between you and God, or you can say, I'm going to engage them the best I can, but I'm also going to give them up. I'm also going to say, you know what, God, whatever you want, have your way. I'm going to believe, and then I'm going to let you fill in on the back end. And I'm going to see what you do, because sometimes experience helps those doubts go to rest more than anything else. That woman was desperate. She came in with desperation, and she was forgiven much. And as I would walk out of that party, if I had been kind of a bystander watching from afar, I think I'd want to be with the woman more than I'd want to be with that Pharisee. Because the Pharisee wasn't going to change much. Simon was going to keep on being critical and cynical maybe, and trying to poke all the holes. But that woman, she was going to have a different life. She was going to live differently. She was going to experience something new. And I think that's a really big treasure and gift. Something so many of us really need and want. All right. That's enough for me tonight. I'm going to say a prayer. If you guys have any questions or thoughts, feel free to send me a message, samprowitz@ripandchurch.com, or post it here. I'll try and check back here tomorrow. If you watch this later, feel free to send me anything you want to ask questions about. It'll also be up on YouTube as well later. If you want to share it that way, feel free, or check it out that way. That would be awesome. With that, I'm going to say a prayer that we might live with desperation, actually accepting God's gifts, rather than live with these cynical doubts that keep us from actually having this close relationship. All right, would you pray with me? Dear God, thank you so much for this night. Thank you for the fact that as we really look to you for what you offer, as we actually take a step towards you in that way, you meet us there. Like the woman who washed Jesus' feet. Out of our desperation, knowing that we need what you have to offer, you don't take advantage of that. You actually gift us what we need in the most free and loving way possible, and we want that. Whenever we come to you, God, with these doubts that are just ways to drive wedges between us and you, when we're not really willing to listen to you or be drawn closer to you, help us to be able to see that. Help us to open ourselves up to what you have for us. Help us to trust you. Help us to have an experience of having you forgive us and love us unconditionally, and see how that changes who we are and transforms who we are. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Awesome. Thanks so much. Have yourselves a fantastic night, and I will hopefully see many of you soon. Have a good night, guys.